Last week, Congress passed the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. By Friday, we had guidance on how this is going to impact small businesses, and in this overview, we want to give you some details of what you need to be aware of and how this might affect your small business. The first part of the act that we're going to review is emergency sick leave. The emergency sick leave section of the Act states that private employers with fewer than 500 workers will have to provide employees who cannot work or telework with paid sick time off if the employee is 1. Subject to a coronavirus or isolation order, 2. Has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to coronavirus concerns, 3. Is experiencing symptoms of coronavirus and is seeking a medical diagnosis, 4. Caring for an individual described in 1 or 2 above, 5. Caring for a child whose school or place of care is closed or the child care provider of the child is unavailable due to coronavirus precautions, 6. Experiencing any other substantially similar condition specified by HHS in consultation with the Treasury and Labor Departments. Employers of employees who are healthcare providers or emergency responders may elect to exclude those employees from emergency sick leave provisions. Full-time employees are to receive 80 hours of sick leave, and part-time workers are granted leave equivalent to their average hours worked in a 2-week period. The sick leave in either instance has to be available for immediate use regardless of the employee's tenure at the employer. Paid sick time will not carry over from year to year. Workers taking leave for themselves will have to be paid at least their normal wage or the applicable minimum wage, whichever is greater. Workers taking time off to care for family members must be paid at 2/3 of the foregoing rate. Sick leave is capped at $511 per day and $5,110 in the aggregate for leave taken in categories 1 through 3 described in the first bullet points above. This just means for one's own behalf, and it's capped at $200 per day and $2,000 in the aggregate for leave taken in categories 4 through 6, which is to take care of another. Wages required to be paid under the emergency sick leave provisions will not be subject to the 6.2% Social Security payroll tax typically paid by employers on the employee's wages. As the employer, you're still going to have to withhold the 6.2% from the employee's wages. The 1.45% that is the other part of the Social Security Medicare tax is still going to have to be paid in on both the employee and the employer side. Employers with existing paid leave policies will be required to provide workers with sick leave under this emergency program. And it looks like what they're saying here is if you've got employees that have already used their sick leave for the year or part of it, you're still going to have to provide them with the requisite number of hours required in this act. An employer cannot require a worker to use any other available paid leave before using sick time. Employers will be prohibited from requiring workers to find replacements to cover their hours during time off, or 2, discharging or discriminating against workers for requesting paid sick leave or filing a complaint against the employer related to such. Employers will have to post a notice containing information regarding the emergency sick leave provisions. The Labor Department is to create a model notice no later than 7 days after the act is enacted. And I actually looked on the website today and there wasn't anything out there yet, so hopefully that will be coming out soon. The Department of Labor will be authorized to issue regulations to exclude certain healthcare providers and emergency responders from paid leave benefits, 2, exempt small businesses with fewer than 50 employees from paid leave requirements when the imposition of such requirements would jeopardize the viability of the business as a going concern. 3, ensure consistency between the emergency sick leave provisions and emergency family leave provisions described in the next section that we're going to talk about. Related to item 2 here, the Labor Department can issue regulations that exempt small businesses, but this bill takes effect on April 2nd, and the Labor Department is not expected to release any regulations until sometime in April. So I think everybody better be ready at this point to just assume that if you have 50 employees or fewer, you're still going to be subject to this act. Now we're going to review the emergency family leave section of the act. This section of the act states that private sector employers with fewer than 500 workers, along with governmental entities, will have to provide up to 12 weeks of leave for employees who have been on the job for at least 30 days and who are unable to work or telework because they have to care for a minor child if the child's school or place of care has been closed, or if the child care provider of that child is unavailable due to a coronavirus emergency. An employer of an employee who is a healthcare provider or an emergency responder may elect to exclude the employee from the emergency family leave provisions. The first 10 days of leave can be unpaid. A worker could opt to use accrued vacation days or other available paid leave for those days. For subsequent days of leave, workers will receive a benefit from their employers equal to at least 2/3 of their normal pay rate. The paid leave is capped at 200 per day and 10,000 in the aggregate. The Act also states that generally the employee on leave must be restored to his or her position. However, this requirement does not apply to employers with fewer than 25 employees if the position held by the employee on leave no longer exists due to economic conditions or other changes in the employer's operating conditions caused by the coronavirus pandemic, and the employer makes reasonable efforts to restore the employee to an equivalent position. Wages required to be paid under the emergency family leave provisions will not be subject to the 6.2% Social Security payroll tax typically paid by the employers on the employee's wages. So this is similar to the emergency sick leave section. The Department of Labor will be authorized to issue regulations to exclude certain healthcare providers and emergency responders from paid leave benefits and exempt small businesses with fewer than 50 employees from the paid leave requirements when the imposition of such requirements would jeopardize the viability of the business as a going concern. And again, since this takes effect on April 2nd of 2020, and we don't expect any regulations from the Labor Department until sometime in April, I think we just need to assume that we're all going to be subject to that provision at this point. In this section, we're going to review how the federal government is going to assist employers through employer tax credits. Refundable credits for wages and the employer portion of the OASDI component of payroll taxes, which is the 6.2% of the employer portion of Social Security tax, will be provided to employers to cover wages paid to employees for time off under the above sick leave and family leave programs. The sick leave credit for each employee will be for wages, including qualified health plan expenses relating to those wages of up to $511 per day, while the employee is receiving paid sick leave to care for himself or herself, or $200 per day if caring for a family member or child whose school has closed. The credit will be limited to 10 days per employee per quarter. The family leave credit for each employee will be for wages, including qualified health plan expenses relating to those wages, up to as much as $200 per employee per day and $10,000 in the aggregate for all calendar quarters. To prevent a double benefit, employers must include the amount of credits received in their gross income. Any wages taken into account in determining the credit allowed under the above emergency provisions will reduce the Code Section 45S paid family and medical leave credit established by the 2017 Tax Reform Act available to the employer. And most small employers, that's not going to apply to. So I don't think there's much we need to take into account on that section. The Department of the Treasury will be authorized to issue regulations on guidance relating to the credits. The above provisions will take effect on a date selected by the Treasury Secretary within 15 days following the Act's enactment and end on December 31st, 2020. So at this point, it looks like April 2nd will be the start date that you would be required to provide the emergency sick leave or family medical leave. My final thoughts on this are that the federal government is going to provide these credits that we can claim to help offset the costs of the emergency sick leave and emergency family leave costs that our small businesses incur. However, at this point, without any official guidance, I think it's going to be really important to make sure that we're calculating the leave time correctly. We know the reasons why the employee is off, so we can document that, and that we're maintaining written documentation so that when it comes time to claim the credit, that we've got some backup of why we claim the credit and that we're calculating the correct amounts. So I appreciate you listening to this, and if you've got questions, please don't hesitate to contact us and we'll be happy to answer whatever we can. Thank you.